We're going to go on an interesting... Wait just a second. Okay, fine. We are going to go on an interesting journey tonight on the question if is the difference of opinion, is it a blessing? So there's an interesting debate on the following question. How is the halacha decided? Is the halacha decided according to the view of whoever is a greater in a wisdom, or is it decided according to the view of the majority? So this is the question which we're going to try and understand. So first of all, I would like to hear you. What do you think? What do you think?
I think it's
the answer is.
I think it's sort of as usual. It depends. So if you have a majority of people, but they're not, they're sort of, they're scholars in their own right, but they're lower level Torah scholars compared to a minority of very high level Torah scholars. But the minority of high level Torah scholars is quite unanimous. The lower level is also unanimous. You should go with the higher level Torah scholars. But if you have if it's not as like a much a line in the sand, as in there's not unanimity amongst the higher scholars, you should go with the majority. The majority of higher scholars. So I guess go with both.
Okay, so this is something very interesting what you were saying, that you could see actually both views. You could see that from one side, one would say that the great Torah scholars, they would be the ones who are supposed to rule the halacha. But on the other hand, you would say, wait, we have to go according to the majority. So this is a very, very big dilemma, which continues even to these days. There's still today a debate about this question, and we are going to, as I said, go on a journey in the footsteps of Chazal to explore different stories, very important stories, where this big question came into place. Okay, so the first story, this is our first station. You could see it in a source number 1. This is a very, very famous, fundamental sugya in the Talmud. Like it's a classic about the nature of a machloket and about this question.
What about the oven?
That's right. It is a very, very famous question. We are going to see beneath the surface, okay? It is going to be very interesting. We are going to see the explanation of a Vilna Gaon on this his story. Okay, so it is the carob tree, the water canal, and the walls of the Beit HaMidrash. It's a very dramatic story. So, first of all, just a small background. There is a pure halachic debate between Chachamim and Rabbi Eliezer on the question if a certain oven is considered a vessel, and if that is the case, what are the implications regarding purity? Okay, so there's all kinds of very complicated debate about this, but we are not going to deal now with the halachic implications for this. Just to understand what happened after each view expressed the opinion. Okay? So the Talmud tells us like this: באותו היום השיב רבי אליעזר כל תשובות שבעולם ולא קיבלו ממנו. On that day, Rabbi Eliezer advanced all the arguments in the world. Now, you could imagine all the arguments of the world. This is something extraordinary, right? But it says, "V'lo kiblu himeno." The sages did not accept his arguments. So, what is he going to do next? Amar lehem, im halacha kmoti charub ze yochiach. If a halacha is according to me, the carob tree is going to prove it. And of course, the carob tree proved it. How did it prove it? נעקר חרוב ממקומו 100 אמה, והמרילה 400 אמה. So the carob tree was uprooted from its place, and it was placed 100 amot. Okay, ama is like a half a meter. Okay, so 50 meters. And some say it was 400 amot, 200 meters. So what do you think is the answer of a Chachamim? Were they impressed by it? They weren't impressed at all. They said, "Amru lo ein miviim raya min hacharuv." You can't prove anything from carob trees. We are very sorry. It is not considered a valid proof, a valid halachic proof, doing all kinds of miracles of carob trees. That's impossible. So, what did Rabbi Eliezer do now? So Chazar ve'amar lehem im halacha kmoti amat hamayim yochichu. So he said, if a halacha is according to me, let the water canal prove it. And of course, if the water canal flowed backwards. Now, that is against the laws of gravity, right? So this is a very big proof, right? But were the sages impressed by that? Weren't impressed whatsoever. And they said, "En mivhim raya mi'amat hamayim." You can't prove anything from water canals. So he said to them, "Amar lehem im halacha kmoti." If a halacha is according to me, Kotler beit midrash yechichu. It was like an earthquake. Okay, the walls of a beit midrash are going to prove it, and they started collapsing. So it says, "Yika'ar behem Rabbi Yehoshua." Rabbi Yehoshua was over there, and he said he rebuked them, these the walls of the Beit Midrash, and he told them like this: "Im talmidei chachamim menatzchim ze et ze bahalacha, atem ma tivchem." If Torah scholars oppose one another in halacha, what business is it of yours? Why are you trying to interfere?
I spoke to the wall.
Yes. Well, if a carob tree can be uprooted and the water canal can go backwards, so you could also speak to the walls. And it worked. How did it work? It says, "Lo naflu mipnei kvodo shel Rabbi Yehoshua." The walls did not fall because when Rabbi Yehoshua rebuked them. "V'lo zakfu mipnei kvodo shel Rabbi Eliezer." And they didn't go back to their first position because they honored Rabbi Eliezer. And it says, ועדיין מתין ועומדים. And they are still in that position until this day. Okay, so if the archaeologists, they have to find if there's a Beit Midrash, if all this drama took place, and then when they uncover it, they're going to see that the walls are still tilting. Okay? And then, do you think that Rabbi Eliezer gave up? No. So what did he do? He used his best proof. What do you think is the best proof?
Oh, of the divine voice.
That's right. That is always for your best proof. If you have to prove anything, use that proof, okay? So it says, חזר ואמר להם, אם הלכה כמותי, מן השמיים יוכיחו. Okay, so he said, if a halacha is according to me, let heaven prove it. And then what happened? Yatsa bat kol. Bat kol is a heavenly voice. He came out and said, Ma lachem etzel Rabbi Eliezer shalacha kmoto bechol makom. Okay, so it proclaimed, what argument you have with Rabbi Eliezer, whom the halacha follows in all places. Okay, so do you think that the sages accepted that?
No.
Who thinks that the sages accepted that?
I know what's going to happen. No. And they're going to bring the voice. No one's going to say majority rules, majority wins. Sorry. Doesn't matter. You still win. I heard this one in Yeshiva.
That's right. So it says, עמד רבי יהושע על רגליו ואמר, לא בשמיים היא. The Torah is not in heaven. And then the Talmud, he tries to understand, what does it mean that the Torah is not in heaven? אמר רבי ירמיה שכבר ניתנה תורה מהר סיני, אין אנו משגיחים בבת קול, שכבר כתבת בהר סיני בתורה אחרי רבים להטות. Okay, so he said, for the Torah was already given to man at Mount Sinai. So therefore we do not pay any attention to heavenly voices, because that Hashem already wrote in the Torah that the decision will be according to the majority. Okay, so you don't try using the heavenly voice. If you have an argument, better convince your comrades to agree with you, because that the halacha is only decided according to majority. The majority.
So that would mean that if the actual, if the opinions would be reversed, and the other three guys, okay, there must be one of them. Also, the different opinion, like the opposite opinion, but he would all do the same wonders, or magic or whatever. Yeah. And the other three would say no. We're the majority. You're wrong. Even the bad call is not the proof. And even that would be the different opinion, the opposite opinion. Then we would posken like this. Then we would say, okay, this is the halacha.
That's right. We go according to the majority. These are the rules that the Torah was given by. And if we go back to our previous question, does the ruling of halacha go according to the view of whoever is greater in wisdom, or according to the majority view? What can you prove from this story?
Goes into the majority view.
That's right. You go according to the majority view. Now, let's go deeper. Okay? So, in order to go deeper, we have to ask a very important question. And the question is, always when we study the words of a Chazal, they cannot be understood literally. There has to be a deeper meaning. Now, what is this? Carob trees, water canals, heavenly voices of the walls of Beit HaMikdash. What is going on here? How could you understand this? Why did Rabbi Eliezer try to use specifically these proofs? What point is he trying to prove?
He tries to prove that he has divine assistance or approval by performing miracles like this that are clearly above nature.
Absolutely. But why specifically these miracles? What do you say?
Well, it seems like he's going from. I mean, they're all miraculous, but he's going from less miraculous to like more miraculous.
Interesting.
I think like carob tree, it's like a living thing. So it's like he's like proven that like living things, even like trees, would be supporting him. Then he goes to the water canal, like just like even the physical world would be supporting him. And then he goes all the way to heaven to be supporting him. He's like bringing the witnesses, you know. It's like as if he was making like bringing witnesses before a court. And he's like all life, all the material, and all the spiritual supports me. You know? I don't know. It seems like
Beautiful. That's a very nice explanation. You were saying that perhaps Rabbi Eliezer is trying to prove is a view from nature, from the physical world into the natural world. Very interesting, and perhaps that is also an explanation. I would like to suggest the explanation of a Vilna Gaon. Now, just a small story about the Vilna Gaon, and he's speaking about heavenly voices. Okay, there's a story about the Vilna Gaon that they used to be angels who tried to come to him and you tell him the secrets of the Torah. And the Vilna Gaon refused to listen to any of them. He actually told them to go away, because what he said that he does not believe in unnatural ways to study Torah. He believed that one has to study Torah with one's own sweat and blood. One has to work hard in order to understand the Torah secrets. And he refused to receive any heavenly presence. He wanted it to achieve it himself. And so this is a very interesting and important story, because he was extraordinary. He knew all of the Torah by heart, and he was able to get to such a high level that nobody in many generations was able to get to his level. He was a great Kabbalist. He also was the first Zionist, because he sent his pupils to Eretz Israel, the land of Israel, to get here at year 1840 in order to prepare the land. And he settled the land because he understood that something is going to happen. Something is going to happen in the middle of the 1900s, and it did. At 1880, it was the first aliyah to Eretz Israel of the Zionistic movement, and he foresaw everything. He understood, and he's got a very special book that his pupils wrote in his name called Kol Hator. And it is very, very complicated with many, many secrets about the process of the redemption. And all of this, he was able to understand himself, but he did not want any help from heaven, even though he was offered help, but he refused it. So this is just a story talking about the heavenly voices, and that the Torah is not in heaven. Since Hashem gave the Torah to man, we have to work hard and understand it. And when we understand it, the halacha goes according to the majority. So, how does he explain this story of a debate between Rabbi Eliezer and Chachamim and the sages? So he says something extraordinary. So first of all, he says that we have to look at Pirkei Avot in source number 2. It says, Hu haya omer im yu kol chachmei Yisrael bekaf maznaim. If all the sages were here to stand on a scales, okay? Ve'Eliezer ben Horkanus, and Rabbi Eliezer, the same Rabbi Eliezer is going to stand on the other side of the scale. Which side is going to be
his side gonna be heavier?
Which side is going to go down? Right. The side of Rabbi Eliezer, because he was such a great sage. He was extraordinary, greater than all the sages in his generation. And it says also, it says, but he was, I am just going to bring another proof to that. Okay, so the Vilna Gaon says that since Rabbi Eliezer was known as the Gedol Dor, the greatest sage in his generation, so they argued on this question that we are talking about. Because when he said, it is true that you are a majority, but I am greater than all of you. And that's why the halacha has to be according to me. Now, one could say that, how could he say about himself that he is a greater than all the other sages? But it is a... So what do you say?
The sages themselves, do they say that he was a greater chacham than they are? Like, do they acknowledge this? Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay. Well, then I think they are the majority, so they must be true. I don't know. So, seems, it seems unlikely that there's one person that is so much higher in his knowledge than everybody else. There must be at least someone that is, or a few that must be on his level.
Mm-hmm. Rabbi Kotler says that a true humility, it does not mean that one it doesn't know his self-value. True humility means that one knows that he is great. One knows that he is a self-value. And so when we deal with the halacha, the truth, so the truth is so powerful that he knew that he was right. And since he knew that he was right, he was not afraid to say so. And so, why did he use these as specific proofs? Okay, the carob tree, the water canal, and the walls of the Beit Midrash. We're going to try and understand this. Okay, and so the Vilna Gaon says like this: that the carob tree, it represents the trait of being satisfied with what one has. And how do we know this? So it says, you could see in the source free. דאמר רב יהודה אמר רב, בכל יום ביום בת קול יוצאת מהר חורב, אומרת כל העולם כולו ניזונים בשביל חנינא בני, וחנינא בני די לו בקו חרובין, carobs, מערב שבת לערב שבת. Each and every day a heavenly voice issues from Mount Chorev, and it says that the entire world is sustained for the sake of Hanina, my son. While Hanina, my son, is satisfied with a kav of carobs from one Shabbat to the next. So the carobs actually represent being satisfied with what you have. And this is a vital trait for acquiring the Torah, as we are soon going to see. And then the water canal, the aqueduct, okay? It represents which trait, do you think?
Maybe knowledge.
Knowledge, okay.
Let's say chesed, giving.
Chesed, okay. So the Vilna Gaon says that it represents the trait of humility. Why? So if you look at the source number 4, it says in the tractate of Yatanit, למה נמשלו דברי תורה למים? תכתיב הווי כל צמא לכו למים. לומר לך מה מים מניחים מקום גבוה והולכים למקום נמוך. אף דברי תורה אין מתקיימים אלא במי שדעתו שפלה. So he says, why are the words of Torah compared to water? Because when it says, everyone who is thirsty, go to the water. This is true. It teaches us that water flows from a high level to a lower level. So also the words of Torah are retained only by one who is humble. So this trait is vital for acquiring the Torah. Now, the third proof was the walls of the Beit Midrash, right? So why did he try and prove his case from those? Because it represents what trait? The walls of the Beit Midrash.
That.
That's right, that, yes. The devotion to the Torah study. How do we know this? It says in the tractate of Eruvin, you could look at source 5, במי אתה מוצאן? במי שמשכים ומעריב עליהם לבית המדרש. With whom will you find them? Who is capable of attaining of this high level of scholarship? With one who comes early in the morning and stays late into the evening in the Beit HaMidrash in order to study the words of it, of the Torah. So let's now put everything together. So the Vilna Gaon explains that since Rabbi Eliezer, he was satisfied with what he had. He was humble. He was devoted to Torah study, and so therefore it was believed that he was the greatest Torah scholar in the whole generation because of these great traits of the being of the Gadol Ador. He had these traits. So therefore he thought that even though his view was a minority, it should outweigh the view of a majority. Okay? But the Chachamim, they disagreed with him. They believed that the halacha should always be ruled according to the majority, regardless of how great Torah scholar Rabbi Eliezer was. So this is actually the a deeper explanation to understand this. If it's a dramatic story, and it gives us a crystal clear answer to our question, that if it is a view, does the ruling of a halacha go according to the view of whoever is greater in wisdom, or according to the majority? And we prove from the story that it goes according to the majority. We don't pay attention to the Gadol Ador if he is against the majority. And soon we are going to talk about why this is so important. But now let's move to a second story. Okay? So any questions until now? Does anyone have any question? Okay, so a second story. The money and the walking stick on Yom Kippur. Okay, now money and walking sticks, they don't go together with the Yom Kippur, right? But there is a story, a very strange story, that they actually do. Okay? So the Mishnah in Rosh Hashanah, in the tractate of Rosh Hashanah, yes?
Gamliel told Rabbi Yeshua on the day that it was Yom Kippur with the walking stick and money.
That's right. This is exactly the story. So Rabbi Yeshua once calculated that Yom Kippur should fall in a certain date, okay? But Rabban Gamliel and his Beis Din, they thought otherwise. So Rabban Gamliel, he sent the following message, as you just said, to Rabbi Yeshua, and he told him like this: שלח לו רבן גמליאל, גוזרני עליך שתבוא אצלי במקלך ובמעותיך ביום הכיפורים שלך להיות בחשבונך. I decree that you come to me with your walking stick and your money on Yom Kippur as it falls according to your calculations. Okay, so Rabban Gamliel wanted it to be completely clear that the calculations of the Rabbi Yehoshua are not according to the halacha. His Yom Kippur is not Yom Kippur. And to prove it, he said, you have to come to me with your walking stick and your money. Meaning that you have to violate your Yom Kippur. Okay? Now, what is the essence of this discussion? Why was it so important for Rabban Gamliel to force him to come, to violate his Yom Kippur according to his calculations? Why do you think this is so important? Why make such a big drama out of this? So what do you say? So it's important to understand a bit of a background. And now Rabbi Yeshua was at the time the president of the court. Okay? And it says about him in a Pirkei Avot that Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai said about him, "Happy is she who gave birth to him." And the Rabban Gamliel, he even admitted that Rabbi Yeshua is greater than he is. How do we know it? So during the story, the continuation of the story, so it says that after he met Rabbi Dosa ben Horkines and also Rabbi Akiva, we are going to talk about his meeting. But after he did come to a Rabban Gamliel with his money and his walking stick in his hand, so a Rabban Gamliel said to him, "Come in peace, my master and my disciple. My master in wisdom, and my disciple that you accepted my words." So it seems that Rabban Gamliel actually admitted that Rabbi Yeshua was his master in wisdom. So Rabbi Yeshua was the Gadol Ador. Okay? He was the greatest sage in the generation. He was greater in wisdom than anyone else. And nevertheless, because of that, Rabban Gamliel forced him to come publicly on his Yom Kippur that fell according to his calculations. Why? Because this is the same argument that we are talking about. That Rabbi Yeshua thought that the ruling of the halacha goes according to whoever is greater in wisdom, and not necessarily according to the majority. But Rabban Gamliel said, no, you cannot rule the halacha like that. The halacha always has to go according to the majority, according to Rabban Gamliel and his Beis Din, because his Beis Din, they were the majority at that time. So, how did Rabbi Yeshua understand the message that Rabban Gamliel actually told him? So there's a story that he was walking and he found the Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Dosa ben Horkines on his way. And what did they tell him? So it says like this: if that Rabbi Dosa ben Horkines he told Rabbi Yeshua that he was mistaken, that a majority you think that you are greater in a wisdom, and that's why the halacha has to be according to you. You are mistaken. The halacha only goes according to the majority. And he says like this, that if we are going to reconsider Rabban Gamliel's Beit Din, if you don't approve of the Beit Din of the Rabban Gamliel, so we will have to reconsider each and every Beit Din, right, that arose from the time of Moshe until now. And this says, surely we cannot do, right? So Rabbi Dosa ben Horkines actually taught him that the ruling of halacha does not necessarily go according to whoever is greater in wisdom. It goes according to the majority. And then he accepted it, as he just said. Now, we are going to move to the third story. This is a very, very famous story. It says This is about Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai and the heavenly voice. Okay, there's another heavenly voice. So it says in the Talmud, in the tractate of Eruvin, Shalosh shanim nechlaku Beit Shammai u'Beit Hillel, alanu omrim halacha k'motenu, v'alanu omrim halacha k'motenu. During 3 years, they had a very serious debate. Is the halacha according to Beit Hillel or to Beit Shammai? And everyone said that it's according to us. יצא בת קול ואמרה, אלו ואלו דברי אלוקים חיים הן בהלכה כבית הלל. It is true that both of the views are דברי אלוקים חיים. They are the words of God, but the halacha is according to Beit Hillel. And now, what question could you ask about this? A very big question.
Why is it like hell?
Why is the bad call of in this case accepted?
That's right. That's right. We said before, Lo b'shamayim, we don't pay any attention to heavenly voices, right? So the answer is that we didn't really pay attention to the heavenly voice, but Beit Hillel were the majority, and because they were the majority, so that is what was decided. Meaning that heavenly voices, they cannot go against the halacha. Okay, in the previous story that we talked about Rabbi Eliezer and a Chachamim and the heavenly voice ruled against the halacha, because it ruled according to Rabbi Eliezer, right? That he was the minority, right? And according to the halacha, you could only go according to the majority. So that's why they said, Lo b'shamayim, we don't go according to heavenly voices, we just go according to the halacha. But in this case, the heavenly voice was according to the halacha, because Beit Hillel, they were the majority, right? So it says, what was actually the argument? Because if we say that that Beit Hillel and the Beit Shammai, they argued, right? So what exactly was the argument? The argument was that Beit Shammai, they were greater in wisdom, and Beit Hillel were greater in number. Okay, so this was actually the argument between them. Okay, and that is why we did need the heavenly voice. Okay, so we can prove also from this story. What can we prove? That the halacha goes according to the majority. Okay. Now we're going to see the fourth and final story. Okay, and this is the removal of the god of the Beit Midrash. Okay, so there's a story in the Talmud about another big debate between Rabban Gamliel and Rabbi Yehoshua. Okay, but this time not about Yom Kippur, about a different question. If the prayer of Mariv is
brachos, if the prayer of Mariv is optional or chayev.
That's
Rabbi
right.
Gamliel says it's optional. Rabbi Yeshua says it's chayev. And then Rabbi Gamliel asked Rabbi Yeshua to come in front and give his opinion, and Rabbi Yeshua said it's optional. And so Rabbi Gamliel made him stand on one foot and learn while he was teaching the whole entire class.
Mm-hmm. Very good, very good. So if this is a famous story, if the prayer of a Yemariv is optional, or if it is a chayav, and as you said at the beginning, Rabbi Yeshua, he tried to not increase the machloket, the debate, but Rabban Gamliel, he put him on the spot and he made him say his view. And then it says that the because by the Rabban Gamliel he treated Rabbi Yeshua in a harsh way, and the people thought it was disrespectful, so they decided to remove Rabban Gamliel from being president. And then on that day that they removed him, very interesting things happened. Okay? And one of the things, it says, you could see in source 10, אותו היום סילקו לשומר הפתח, ונתנה להם רשות לתלמידים להיכנס. So, on the same day, they removed the guard of the Beis HaMidrash. Now, why was there a guard of the Beit HaMidrash? In those days, he did a check like over here, in a Machon Meir, like there's a little butke, he's checking if whoever comes is a Talmid in the Machon or not. Why was there a guard in the Beit HaMidrash?
I don't think it meant God. I think it's more of like what it says in the Gemara is that they moved the guy, they moved the like before, like and you like when Rabbi Gamliel was in power, only people with like pure hearts or something were
Right.
able to walk in and everything and all. People with not pure hearts were not allowed to come in and everything and all. And then they removed him, and then all of a sudden a lot of people started coming in and everything, and it was like 10 or 20 times more than it was normal. So they took out like Rabban Gamliel's system of like who's allowed to enter, who's allowed to come in, and just made it open to the public almost.
Very good, exactly. So Rabban Gamliel used to say, "Kol talmid she'en tocho kevaro lo yikanes לבית המדרש." Any pupil who isn't as he seems shouldn't enter the Beit HaMidrash. Because but Rabban Gamliel used to believe that quality is greater than quantity. He preferred that there would be a few good Talmidim than many Talmidim who aren't exactly on the same level. So in the reality, what happened in the reality, on that day that the guard of the entrance of the Beit HaMidrash was removed, what do you think happened? So some say that 400 rows of the students were added to the Beit HaMidrash, and some people say that 700, meaning that many people came. Okay? And so this is the first thing that happened on that day. Another interesting thing that happened on that same day, which is connected, we're going to see the connection, that the Talmud says, you could see at the bottom of the source 10, עדויות בו ביום נשנית, וכל היכא דאמרינן בו ביום, ההוא יומא הווה, ולא הייתה הלכה שהייתה תלויה בבית המדרש שלא פירשוה. Meaning that on that day there was a great ability to understand all of those halachot, all of those laws that weren't understood before, that were in a situation of a safek. And how were they able to make the halakha so clear on that day? Why do you think? You connected to the first event that happened on that day.
They had a greater majority.
That's right, because there were so many people. Rashi says, you could see in Yisos 11, תלויה בספק שלא פרשוה, מתוך שרבו התלמידים רב החידוד והפלפול. We see something extraordinary. If we thought that at the beginning, if a halacha isn't clear, who'd you ask? You ask the Gadol Dor, you ask the greatest scholar, the greatest sage in the generation. Over here we see something completely different. When there are many Talmidim, when there is a diversity of views, many different views, when there are many different Talmidim in different levels, this increases the wisdom. Because there were so many Talmidim, we were able to determine what the halacha was. So we understand that over here, in the question of quality or quantity, the answer is that the quantity creates quality. This is the great message that we understand from here. The quantity creates quality. Because that we believe in a diversity. We believe that when there are different views, so the truth is able to come out. The truth is crystal clear. Because the truth cannot be in one person alone. And furthermore, that we understand from this, learning it together, that if we talk about the question, why is it so that we go according to the majority? Because it could be that the majority is mistaken. It could be that the Gadol Dor, he knows everything. So the answer is that what Chazal are trying to teach us is that Judaism is never determined on one person. It doesn't matter how great he is. It doesn't matter how great the Gadol Dor is. We do not put all of the weight on Judaism on his soldiers. We put the weight on Judaism on the majority, even if they are not in the same level. And this is a very, very important lesson. Because if something happens to the Gadol Dor, and there has been incidents like that in the history of the Jewish people, it says that one of the greatest sages was Elisha ben Avuya. Acher. Elisha ben Avuya was a very, very great sage. He was one of the four who was able to enter the Pardes. The Pardes is the greatest secrets of the Kabbalah. And he was one of the greatest sages, but he went astray. He turned into there are terrible things about what he did, mentioned in the Talmud. That's right. So it also says that one of the sages was a Kohen Gadol for 80 years, and then
he felt it there too. Rabbi Yochanan.
That's right. So we cannot put the whole weight of Judaism on one person. It doesn't matter how great he is. the weight of Judaism has to be on the majority. We always go according to the majority, and this is a very, very important rule. And as it says in the Torah, Achrei Rabim Le'atot. And the answer is that the quantity actually creates the quality. Because of their diversity, because of the different views, because of the different approaches of. This is why the Sanhedrin has to be of 71 sages, and not only one sage to decide. It has to be according to 71 sages. That they have to. Not everyone was on the same level, but they have to have knowledge in languages and science and everything. They had to know the world. And when they decided something, they actually represented the complete views. Because all of the main views were, as it says, but there's a Yeshivim Panim La Torah. The Torah has 70 different aspects, because the number 70 is the different views that are possible. As it says, that there are 70 languages, meaning the foundations. Okay, here today there are more languages than a 70, but if you go backwards, you could find that there are 70 different basic languages, but the other languages are developed from there. So, despite everything that I said, there are another 3 very important points that I have to say. There are cases which we do not rule against the majority. Specific cases you could see over here. We aren't going to explore it now, but there are specific cases. For example, I am just going to say it very, very shortly. If the majority aren't scholars, okay, so you don't go according to them, okay?
That's what I was mentioning earlier.
There has to be a minimum level, okay, of the majority, okay? You don't just go according to the masses because they are a greater number, okay? There has to be a minimum level, okay? But if they are sages on a minimum level, so you would go according to them. And now, also is something important, that the view of the Gadol Dor should be seriously considered. Even if we don't rule according to him. Even if we say, okay, we are going to rule against the Gadol Dor because he is the minority, and we go according to the majority, we have to consider his view seriously. We have to try and understand what he said, okay? And if we decide otherwise, that is fine. It is according to the halakha, but at least try and understand what is he trying to say. Okay, so this is a very fundamental idea in the halakha, that we always go according to the majority. So Any questions? Any comments? Insights?
There will be continuation next week
And
on this topic.
well, a different topic. It is going to be connected to machloket. I wrote a book about a machloket and unity. So it could be, but we're going to explain it. But it is something completely different than Avis today. Okay, so good evening and Chag Matan Torah Sameach, a happy Shavuot.
חג מתן תורה שמח. גם ממך.